I think cancel culture is ridiculous. I think there are very few people in a society who need to be canceled altogether. The majority of us just don't like to hear opposing thoughts, or we don't believe in grace. Like, man, if we begin to cancel all the people who deserve to be canceled because of things they've done wrong, then we'll have a society of silent people. That's problematic.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl KB of Heart Combos, and you are joining me and my guest today in the Heart Seat. Today, my guest is the one and only Sho Baraka. He is an artist, he is a thinker, he is a creator, and he's been around for a long time. This man is a man of thought, philosophy, he's an academic, he's a family man, he loves his wife, he loves his children, and everywhere he goes, he leaves his mark. Would you welcome with me to the show, Sho Baraka? Welcome to the show. Sho.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I've been a fan of your stuff for a second.
Hey man, you're so gracious. You are so gracious. I'm excited to have you. Been rocking with you for a very long time. And so it is really a privilege of mine to be able to talk to you today. So I'm just going to jump into the 5 questions. They are honest, elephant size, authentic, real, and transparent. We are going to have nothing but heart combos here in the Heart Seat. So let's just go ahead and get it started. What are your honest thoughts just right now as a Black man in America, as a father of an autistic child, as an academic leader, I would say. What are your thoughts, honestly, about what's happening in 2020?
The short pithy answer is praise God that I have hope in Jesus. That's the quick answer, because without the traditional, I guess, theology that I can pull from in history, dating back to the first people who believed and trusted, who crossed the land, the oceans to get here, there was very little hope for them as well. But through their faith and through their resilience, they understood that they lived in an already but not yet. And so I think for folks like us who have a faith to lean on, we're called to see beyond our current circumstances and our conditions to a greater hope. However, in our hope for another world and a better reality that is soon to come, we also recognize that we have a call to do something about the conditions we live in right now. And so because of that, I just don't walk with my head to the heavens, like, you know what, and ignore the present conditions that are around me. I look to the heavens in order for it to inform me and fuel me to see the present conditions of this world. And so I don't walk around hopeless. I think a lot of academics and pundits and activists speak with a lot of nihilism and a lot of pessimism. And I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of is as Black people, not just Christians, but as Black people, is that though our conditions have been horrible, there have been people who've waded the waters and made it through, and we too will make it through these current conditions.
That's real good. Thank you so much for just diving in kind of right straight to the main thing, which kind of transitions well into my second question for you, and that is the elephant in the room. What is the elephant in the room right now in Christian spaces? Like the extreme of people who want to lean into activism, they want to be vocal about advocating for the rights and lives of Black people, and to those on the other extreme that might feel like that is a separate issue, separate and apart from the gospel. What would you say is the elephant in the room in those conversations?
I don't know if the conversation is any different in the church than it is anywhere else, if I'm honest. Like, no matter who you have conversations with, there are polarizing views. And I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to know, like, in the last 3 presidents that or 4 presidents, mainly 3 since Bush. I've been king since Bush, and I don't know if we've lived in a more polarizing time than now. And that's not only, there've been recent research, there's been recent studies that shows that people are more politically divided than anything else, even racially or religiously. And I think the church, like the halls of academia, like households, folks are just unwilling to have nuanced conversations about what America is like. There are people who are extremely polarized, and on one side, who is just this great country who has that, and yes, we did some things in the past, but it's all good now. You know what I'm saying? And then we have some folks who are like, man, America is the worst of places, and there's no hope for us, and there's no place for us to advance, and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think it's either or. I think it's somewhere that's much more nuanced. I won't say in the middle, but I think we also have to see things in macro and micro. And yes, there are systems that have not benefited particular people groups, especially Black folks in this country. But I think most of our, dare I say this, a lot of our issues are micro issues as well. And oftentimes when we see micro issues, we want to implement macro solutions. And I don't know if that's always the case. There are times when it's not the fault of the system, it's the fault of people, right? And I think oftentimes what we want to do is we want to apply issues we want to apply greater resolutions to issues of systems that need to be individual critiques, and vice versa. There are times where systems need to be critiqued and reformed, and not just individuals. So I think we need to have these nuanced conversations, but because of the polarization, whether it be racial, whether it be political, people don't want to sit down and have these discussions. And I mean, we can parse out what particularly, those things are, whether it's policing, whether it's racial disparities, those things need to be discussed. But when you can't even come to the table and say, like, I see you as a human being and let's discuss as mature individuals, then there's no hope for us, because we're so dedicated to our polarizing parties. And the reality of it is there's so much diversity and divergence in every one of us that none of us think alike. Like, you and I may disagree on things and what defines Blackness, right? And to me, to stand up and says this is what is good for Black people is quite, I think, naive and very similar to in the political space. I can deal with people who come to me as conservative or liberals, but I have a hard time having conversations with people who are committed solely to being Republican and Democrat, because to me, what that says is you have married yourself to the party. I much rather deal with you and your ideologies that can vary at times. You know what I mean? But when you say I'm just allegiant to this party, no matter who's in office, I'm allegiant. I show my allegiance to this individual, no matter what their policies are. I'm at a point where I'm like, that's just hard for me to. We have to begin to weigh the merit of an idea versus the people who stand behind them.
Okay, so listen, two things that you said that everything you said I thought was extremely rich, could be a whole conversation in and of itself. But two things that I thought you pointed out in regard to the elephant in the room. One, we all have polarized perspectives. Nobody's willing to see the middle. We always tend to lean far left, far right. We have a hard time navigating the nuances, and that in and of itself is an issue. The other thing you said about the micro and the macro, which I think they both kind of are intertwined, but this idea that we are trying to apply macro solutions to micro problems. And then you said, dare I even say micro? And I'm like, that is also an elephant in the room, that sometimes people are dying on hills that are not macro issues. My goodness, like, this is not a macro issue. However, not to belittle the fact that people's hopes are being deferred, right? So they feel a way about it, not to belittle the fact that people feel crushed and defeated, and there's a lot of hard things going on right now, and they're trying to process trauma and all the things, but some of these things that we're having conversations about are not macro issues, yet we're trying to apply macro solutions to micro problems. That for me was huge. And again, all these are conversations in and of themselves. So awesome. My third question to you, and I don't know if this taps into just other seasons to which I've been able to watch you from a distance, but how do you commit to showing up as your most authentic self? Like, what have you learned over the last decade as it pertains to staying committed to who you uniquely are? Because you mentioned in your last answer, hey, all of us have nuances and we're all have all these things like diverse things that make us who we are. But how do you stay committed to your most authentic self? What has been your journey in even finding your most authentic self, whether it be as an artist or an academic, as a father, whatever?
I think the first thing you must understand is like, to wherever you walk into, like, we all come from tribes, and so, you know, the tribe, the stories, the relationships, the ideas, the religious beliefs of those tribes form the identity of that individual, and you take those with you no matter what room. So you walk into a room with history behind you, right? And I think the problem, what happens is when you enter in that room with avarice, or not with avarice, with pride and lacking humility. Um, I am a hard believer of truth. I do believe that things are true and that facts are facts. However, there are many things that are negotiated, and I think the problem is we walk into spaces not willing to negotiate, and so being your authentic self is understanding everything about you, the things that my tribe has imparted into me, the transmission of ideas, but then also saying, I know who I am, but I'm willing to listen to you guys. I'm willing to hear oh, you guys like Brussels sprouts? I don't mess with Brussels sprouts. Like, oh, you guys like that kind of comedy? You know what I'm saying? Oh, so you guys, okay, this is sexuality you rock with? All right, well, that's not me. You know what I mean? But how am I still willing to see you as human beings, and all of the nuances that make you who you are, while at the same time still being confident in who I am? It's a book out that's called Confident Pluralism, and it's just this idea of how do we, as a society, and America is messed up because it made decisions hundreds of years ago to create labor with slaves, not really thinking about what they were going to do once those people desired freedom. And so now we're living that mess out right now, right? The diversity that we're experiencing is not because people were charitable and wanted to just create a diverse society. It was like, no, we want to exploit people, and through that exploitation, now people are moving up in access, and now they want more opportunity, right? And so because of that, now we're having to deal with the diversity. And we have to figure out how to deal with pluralism and the multiplicity of ideas and identities within a country. And I don't know how we're struggling. We're struggling to do that as a society. And so I think that's one way that you yourself have a responsibility to be authentically who you are, right? I'm not asking anybody to walk into a room and not be themselves. However, I am asking people to walk into the rooms as themselves with humility and with a posture that's willing to consider that other people from other tribes have something to contribute to this conversation.
I actually feel like you took the answer kind of one step further, and I don't think any guest has done this to this point where.
The point for me. Good stuff.
For sure, absolutely. But what you suggested was, if you know who you are, you will be able to negotiate. You know what I mean? If you already know what you believe, who you are, where you stand. Like, you've already settled into your most authentic self, like suggesting you've already kind of arrived at that place, it will be reflected in the fact that you're able to be in spaces with people who don't agree with you, or maybe who don't believe what you believe, because you already know who you are. And so I think that takes this whole like authenticity question, like how do you show up as your most authentic self after you've discovered that? How do you continue to do that? You continue to remind yourself of who you are, so that way when you get into these new spaces where there are opposing views, or, you know, people who lean more heavily left or right, you don't feel like, oh, now I have to question everything that I believe, which oh my gosh, for the last 15 years, you're right, you know, coming to Christ as a college student, from that space to now, I remember that first 5 to 7 years just really like, oh my God, like, I don't know, and feeling pressure to have to pick, right? And have gotten to this space now where I'm like, okay, I know exactly where I'm flat-footed. I know where I'm willing to have conversations, and where I'm looking to the Lord to continue to reveal like things to me that Lord, I don't understand this. I don't know. Help me. So that's
one of my favorite authors. May she rest in peace. Toni Morrison calls it rootedness, right? So she talks about the idea of being rooted in different like truths and the ancestors and whatnot. And for us, we've seen this lived out in African American history. People who've been minorities, known who they are, and been able to negotiate and move through society without losing themselves in some way, forming identities as they moved on, but and also just being like, look, I recognize that I'm a minority and I'm not forfeiting everything about me in order to placate to particular ideas and, and whatnot. But I think it's paramount for a thriving society, is for people to be confident in who they are, while at the same time recognizing that they can coexist with other people who don't think like them.
Correct. So this leads me to our fourth question. We're actually over the hill, right? So question number 4 has to do with the R in the Heart Combos acronym, and it stands for real. It's not really about being real, but it's about addressing real issues in real time. What do you feel like is one of the real issues right now, maybe for millennials or Gen Z, or even, what I'm saying, like even back to baby boomers? Like what is the real issue that you feel like any particular people group right now are need to be able to identify in order to move forward well?
I think, the one.
Pick one.
Yeah, the one. No, right. I got about 7 of them I want to talk about right quick. There's the one that concerns me so much is that there's a lot of information out there. We are not dying of information as a society, with social media, with smartphones, with news, with TV shows, stuff like that you do, stuff that I do. There's always information being given. My concern is whether or not people are becoming wiser with this information. And I think another part of that is that we weaponize information rather than using it to bring maturity and understanding and prudence to ourselves. The other aspect of information is that there's so much. How do you know what is real, like what is true? I think and then once you get information, how do you use it to inform and construct good ideas? Carter G. Woodson says about history, he talks about how history is not purely the gathering of historical facts. It's to come to a reasonable conclusion of those historical facts. And as we gather information, what's the logical conclusion that we can come to after gathering police data on this, after learning about immigration, after learning about these things? Like what can we come to as a society that is reasonable with all this information that's being thrown at us? People just want to talk. People want platforms. And sometimes we go to ridiculous extents to get these platforms. Just to jump to another subject, and I think this is very, very, very important. This is something that I've just started doing I think I've done it for a period of time, but for the last 3 or 4 months, I said, you know what? I'm going to be extremely intentional. If I read one book that has an argument about a particular issue, I'm going to read an opposing argument on the same issue, because too many of us are living in a vacuum with our ideas and our thoughts. And for me, I want to know why somebody believes something about something, right? I never understood why people love Trump. And so now recently I was like, well, let me have real authentic conversations with people who like Trump. I have a family member who is a Trump supporter. And I was just like, please explain this to me. Explain this to me. And over the last couple months, I've come to an understanding on their affection for maybe the things he's doing, not him in general. You know what I mean? And so once you begin to engage content and information, and that could, like, legitimate stuff too. Like, I'm not talking about, like, for instance, I'm just gonna throw these names out there. You on one side you'll have like for all intents and purposes, I respect both of these people, but they're quite polarizing. Like Sean King is on the left, right? Who is very adamant about justice issues. And he says some things that I think are quite ridiculous sometimes, but he also says some things that I think are quite helpful. Then on the other side, you have like a Candace Owens. I'm not talking about polarizing ideas. I'm talking about how do we get people who are sensible. Like, there are academics out there on both sides of the spectrum who actually pose thoughtful content. And we need to begin to engage those individuals who seem sensible and not just run to the spectrum of the argument and just allow that to feed our conscience. Like, what are the sensible people on both sides saying about this argument, and how can I form a synthesis, or say, no, this person on the left makes more sense, or this person on the right. And this is where nuance comes in, and that's why I go back to the whole conservative liberal thing rather than Republican Democrat. There are things that I'm very conservative on. There are things that I'm very liberal on. And I think that's fine. The problem is when you say, I'm going to punt everything just to show my allegiance to this particular side. So I think
No, that's good. That's good. I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. Specifically, your comment about the difference between information and wisdom, and again, having endless access to information, to opinions, to thoughts, to thought leaders, whatever, but not knowing how to apply any of it, like knowing what to do and when to do it, right, for the right reasons. Like, that is not something that you can just read out of a book. Like, that is something that has to be lived. And I also think it's something that is passed down, which that's a whole nother thing in 2020, learning from another person when you can just Google everything. Like, why do I have to actually hear your story, understand your narrative, and take your highs and your lows and use that as kind of a litmus or boundaries maybe for how I go about things? I don't have to. I can literally just look everything up that I want to know and then make my own decisions. And so we function in a very individualistic way. And so as you were just kind of leading into the thought of the issue is that we have too much information and no wisdom, I think is huge. It's huge.
Can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick, and I'll be short. The other thing that I realized within this information and wisdom is people need to have compassionate courage to speak on issues that aren't popular. Like, so for instance, if I'm doing this research and I'm doing this study and I come to this conclusion that I'm like, man, I disagree with this thing because I don't feel like we've broached this in a way that I think is helpful. How do I have the courage to speak out on this in a compassionate way? I don't think the social media world has rewarded people for dissenting from the popular view.
Oh, you just gonna stop right there? Surely he's going to elaborate, but no, like, I'm just going to drop that.
So I think that the point is that there are so many. I have friends who I know have a particular view on something, but they're afraid to speak out because of either the public shaming, opportunities that will be lost, and let me stop talking about other people. I personally have not said certain things because of the shaming or the opportunities that I know. But I know I have friends because I have these conversations with them. And these would be things that I've spoken out on publicly. And I'm like, bro, why aren't you saying something? Or sis, why aren't you saying something? And I get it because a lot of issues, as a friend of mine, Justin, give me talk about, there's a reward mechanism that is dangled by one particular people group. And if you don't follow the rules, you won't receive that reward, right? And so for me, I am trying to learn what it means to have compassionate courage, like to speak out on issues, but to be compassionate about it, not to call people like, I can't believe you guys do that. That's stupid. You're dumb. Why would you? It's like, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but I strongly disagree. I don't think that's helpful for our society. I don't think it's helpful for Black people. I don't think this is blah, blah, blah. So these are the things that I'm trying, but I'm like, hey, I also can recognize that my opinion can be wrong and that the things that I've read and studied may be skewed. So help me. Let's have a dialogue. Let's discuss. But this is where I stand on this particular idea and have the courage not to be ashamed. I think cancel culture is ridiculous. I think there are very few people in a society who need to be canceled altogether. The majority of us just don't like to hear opposing thoughts, or if we don't believe in grace. Like, man, if we begin to cancel all the people who deserve to be canceled because of things they've done wrong, then we'll have a society of silent people. And so I think that's problematic.
Absolutely. So good, man. So good. I know these conversations are meant to be short, but this has been rich, man, for real. So we're at the last question, and that is the T in the Heart Combos acronym: transparency. So when you're being transparent, you're allowing people to see into something that they wouldn't otherwise see unless you expose it. So your desires, your dreams, your boundaries, your expectations, whatever it might be. So for you, transparently speaking, what are your next steps just moving forward? Something that people may not know. Next steps moving forward, again, as a father, as an academic, as a Black man in America, as a Christian, however you want to, whatever angle you want to come from. What are your next steps moving forward?
Level, I think I need more discipline in my life. I need to execute on the dreams and the visions that I have. I am a great idea person. If only if only there were rewards and Grammys and Oscars for the ideas, your boy would be killing right now. I would have all the Peabodys, I would have Pulitzers, I would have Nobel Peace Prize, I would have it all. But unfortunately, they don't reward the good ideas. They reward for execution. And so I've realized that I need to be great at execution. And that's everything from my marriage, that's everything from friendships, that's work, creativity. And I also need to, it's funny, this may sound strange coming from me, for those people who love my music and love my, my art. I need to not be afraid of excellence, like of actually giving my all to something. Just a quick anecdote. I played sports in high school and I was actually pretty good. And my father played professional football. My older brother played college football, the highest level college basketball, college football. And I was a pretty good athlete in high school, but I never worked out. I gave it 60 to 70% in practice. I could have been really, really, really good, but I don't know. I just coasted because I knew my ability can do good enough to get me better than the people on my team, but the reality is I wasn't better. That kind of work habit wouldn't get me a D1 scholarship. You know what I'm saying? I would be the best on my team, but I wasn't the best in my county, or I wasn't the best in my city, or I wasn't the best in my state. And the difference between people who are great, like we all be fools if we think Tyler Perry is the greatest writer. If we think he's the best director, if we think he's the greatest actor. But you know what Tyler Perry is he's the hardest worker. You know what I'm saying? And he's got vision and he's got ideas and he executes on those ideas. And there are a lot of people who hate on Tyler Perry, but show me otherwise. Show me that you can be Tyler Perry, right? And I think I need to be that kind of individual who has that kind of tenacity. And I don't have it. I just don't have it. There's a reason why there are other artists who are more popular than me, because I don't think any of them are more talented than me when it comes to music.
Let's be clear.
We can settle that on a track. You know what I'm saying? But I tell you, the one thing that they do have better than me is they have better work ethics. They grind. They just grind like I don't grind. And I got to figure out how to balance the grind with the creative exhaustion that comes with me, because I believe in creative excellence, but I also am like, I'm just going to chill for about 3 months. And I don't know. It's interesting. I'm writing a book right now that talks about some of these things. And so it's funny that I'm trying to give people pointers on things that I'm failing at, but I also think that's good, because it's like, look, I know what not to do. But here's some things that I've succeeded in, you know what I mean? And so hopefully that's helpful, KB. I don't know. Hopefully that's the hard enough for you.
What you said just now is so real. Like there are so many people who I think can resonate with what you just said. So I'm very thankful that you were vulnerable, because that wasn't just transparent. That was vulnerability, sir. So I appreciate you just exposing yourself in that way to say, like, this is what has been the struggle and what I'm great at, but this is what I realize has held me back. And I think there are a lot of people who can identify with that, and that's great. And I'm excited about the book. Shout out to the book whenever it's coming. I'm looking forward to it.
So the title is He Saw That It Was Good, and it's really about using our creative lives to rebuild a broken world and reimagine a broken world. And I like to take the musings and the mystics of history and say, here's how this individual used their creativity in a way to heal a broken world. How I've done it in this particular way. Here's some restrictions that I feel like and obstacles that have been before us. Here's how I think we can get over those things and paint a better God, if you will. And so yeah, it should be coming out next May. So I'm excited.
This conversation was so incredibly rich, and I'm super thankful just personally for all that you dropped, especially on the tea there at the end. I feel like the tea is always kind of like just the cherry on top for me, because you just never know how open people are going to get, and you weren't just transparent, you were vulnerable, sir, and I appreciate your vulnerability. Thank you to you guys who were watching today. If you are interested in more content like this, if you want to see more episodes of The Heart Seat, you can always become a Heart Combos member and have access to the episodes early, or we will see you same time here next week. Thank you so much for watching. I want you to remember, it's not a hard conversation, it's a heart conversation. Peace.